Alright, today we're going to be making this Red Hood mask. I put a lot of time to try to get some nice definition into the brows and get a nice side profile on it. I feel like it turned out pretty cool. And it was a lot of fun to make. I've been reading the pre-New 52 Red Hood story, and I was also watching the animated film Under the Red Hood. And I just got all stoked on it and felt like making it, so yeah. This is my Red Hood mask. Alright, so first I'm going to use some regular old Elmer's glue, and I have a mannequin head here. What I'm going to do is start putting the glue all over it. Okay. Now that I've got it good and covered, I'm going to go ahead and take some Glad cling wrap. I'm just going to start stretching it all over the area. And I've got to work pretty fast just because the glue will dry somewhat quickly. I'm trying to put it on too thick. It's still thick enough. Alright. Now I've got this whole half of it covered. I'm going to go ahead and start covering this with duct tape. Alright, I did all the duct tape work off camera. Part of the reason for that is it just takes so long. And the only thing of note here is that I didn't do any definition on the lips. You can see it's pretty much a straight line from the nose area right down to the chin. And you know, I did that just because that's kind of how the Red Hood's mask looks. So yeah, my duct taping kind of reflects whatever I want the end result to be. And next, I'm going to use a Sharpie. I'm going to start drawing on some of the cut lines and areas for the patterns. Alright, so using a Sharpie, I'm going to start drawing on here where I want my cut lines to be. First, I'm going to do this one here. It's going to basically go down the center. Slightly. Okay. So there's my basic outline. You can see going all the way around it. Alright. Next, what I'm going to do is start drawing in the way I want the eye area to look like, because this is going to be cut out. something like that. I can always refine it whenever I cut it, just to get the idea. Next, I'm going to start drawing the lines for the actual part of the final pattern and the mask. It's going to come out through here and follow all the way around to the back, like so. And also going to need this line here, like the Red Hood has on his mask, and this final, but I feel rather important one, that goes right down to the chin. Okay, those are going to be the details for my cut areas. Now I am going to have to put one more cut area in, which is going to be for this side piece here. If I don't put this in, it's going to be awful hard to get this round. So yeah. Alright, the final thing I've done is gone ahead and removed this, and I'm letting it dry so the rest of the glue dries, and I just took a paper towel and wiped all the excess glue that wasn't dry off the mannequin head. Right, now I'm going to start cutting this up, and I'm going to start by cutting along the general seam. Okay, so that's the general outline of the left side. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut these individual pieces out. But first, I'm going to put some hash marks, just so I know where this is all going to line up. Alright, now that I've cut out all my individual pieces, I'm going to go ahead and start to trace them onto some 5mm thick EVA foam. Okay, so I needed the patterns to lay flat to trace them, so certain areas where it bunched up, I put a single slit with a pair of scissors, and this made a V on the pattern that later I will end up gluing back together with contact cement, and it'll give it sort of a rounded shape whenever it's glued back together. I did it along a couple places like here where it just wouldn't quite lay flat. I had to put a slit in it to help that out. And over here, same thing. And that's essentially where the nose will be. And next, I'm going to take this, because this is all the left side, flip it upside down, trace it out on another piece of EVA foam, and that'll make all the right side pieces. Right, I got both my left and right side pieces, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a pretty liberal amount of contact cements. I'm going to glue back together all these V's, like here, and here on those pieces, these here, and all the V's here as well. I'm going to put contact cement on all these points, glue them all back together first. Okay, all my V areas are glued together here, and you already notice this has some extra curvature and shape. I basically just did that. I'll demonstrate here real quick, show you. I just took the foam and literally just stretched it a couple inches at a time to give it some curvature and shape. I'm going to go through before I glue all these pieces together. Basically do that to all of these. It's going to ultimately make it a lot easier for me to glue these together if they're already going to be in place. Okay, so the first two sections to get glued together are going to be the center pieces that go along the top. They're going to get glued together along these inside seams here. And the front facial piece is going to get glued together in the center here as well. And both of these, once again, will be connected with some contact cement. Okay, so I got my two center pieces with my contact cement already set up for about 15 minutes. And I'm going to go ahead and glue them together. Now, whenever you're doing this, you want to make sure that you have it totally lined up from the start, because there is no give with contact cement. Like, once it's together, it's together. You can't get it apart, which you just tear it up, which I'm not going to do. So yeah. You see there's the centerpiece all stuck together. Next, I'm going to take the two top pieces and I'm going to go ahead and glue them together. This is, of course, the center of the helmet. Go through and apply a little extra pressure here after the fact, just to make sure that all this is good and stuck together proper. Okay, and there now you have your top piece. And of course, these two are going to get glued together, like so. Alright, next I glued these two side pieces together. And what I'm going to do next is this top piece. You'll notice I extended this a little bit and heated it and folded it. And the reason for that was, you can see this line here. That's where it's going to glue onto this here. And it's going to create a slightly offset look that's going to give it a brow ridge. It's going to look something like this here. See how it's slightly offset? And that'll help give it a little automatic definition just by having that little offset bit. And then I can put some heat on it and shape some brow areas into it. But first, I'm going to glue the sides onto this using the contact cement, same as I have so far for everything else. Okay, I went ahead and I glued one side on the left side. Doesn't really matter which one. I don't know how much you can tell here, but I did leave a sort of a gap. So there's kind of a line here, because you want, well, at least I want this definition line. It's a natural definition line in the hood, Red Hood's helmet, not just the way that I cut it because I needed a pattern per se, as I patterned around the actual lines of the helmet itself. So yeah, that's the whole side glued on. And next I'm going to do the other side. And a couple times I've tried to do this where I try to do both sides at once. I put glue on all three pieces. Try to do one side and the other. Inevitably, I end up getting contact cement all over my hands and everything else. It's kind of a mess. So I've learned to just be patient, do one side and then the other. Whenever I glued this on, I started with this corner, secured this bottom lip, and then worked my way all the rest of the way around. And part of the reason I did that is this is a fairly complicated area just because of the angles and the corners, and you really want everything to match up. So, excuse me, I started there and then went ahead and did this because it's just a simple curve. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and do the other side. Okay, so here it is with all the sides glued together. Now at this point it doesn't have much shape. It's fairly flat. You see there's a little bit of shape just from the V-points and the natural curvature that I stretched into it. And of course like the little overlapping points like this point here. But I'm going to need to gradually go through small areas at a time and start heating and shaping it. So I can put like the creases in here for the nose, and I'm going to stretch and fold this in for some eyebrow effects and so on. But I'm going to start with the bottom here, this first plate here, start heating and shaping that and then working my way up. Okay, so to heat it and put some form and shape into it, I use a heat gun. And you can see over here, I've done nothing. And this is all relatively flat still. But over here, I warmed up the outside and briefly the inside. Just gently push this in. You can see that already starts to give it a nice brow shape. And I sort of pushed in here and pushed out here to give it a cheekbone shape. And did the same thing over here. I think you can see a little bit better the shape. And I just try to match both sides up as much as possible. And how you want this to look, of course, is up to you. So, you know, you can always put brows in, or you can leave it smooth, or you can not even heat and shape it. You can leave it just the way it is and put in some lenses and stuff, and then go ahead and seal the foam and paint it and just call it a day, basically. But I like to put some shape into mine. Like I say, to do this, I use a heat gun. People say you can use a hair dryer. Takes probably a lot longer. The heat gun's pretty hot. You need to be careful with it. And if you're, you know, a minor, you need to have a parent or guardian. Drop the camera. You need to have a parent or guardian probably help you with this part because, you know, heat guns are, you know, several thousand BTUs. They're really, really hot. So always be very, very careful. You know, a quick spray over with the heat gun will warm it up enough that you can start pressing it in. Get it too hot and the foam will catch fire. So always be careful. Alright, so I used the heat to put some more definite brow ridges and such in it, and pretty happy so far with the detail and all that. Any minute adjustments I can make later. I did put a little more oomph into the cheeks and into this down section here and put a little more shape into here. I also used the heat to smooth out this area here. Now this seam I pretty much left alone. I'm not really going to do anything to it, mostly just because I'm going to leave it there. Like I want that seam running along it. One thing I am going to do though is I'm going to take an old paintbrush and some super glue, and I'm going to put a bead of super glue along all these seams. I'm going to go ahead and brush it in and smooth it out. That'll help seal it up and make it nice and stiff. After that, I'm going to start sanding. Now you notice I said I use an old paintbrush because pretty much as soon as I do this, this is going to be thrown in the trash. Alright, now that I have the seams all glued up, I didn't bother to do this seam, but I did do these V areas, but not the seam. Actually, I'm going to leave these seams as it's part of the actual mask itself. Just the center and the side pieces are going to be sanded and siliconed. So yeah, I stuck this out in my garage. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to let this dry for as long as it takes, probably about an hour or so. Alright, I got some rough grit sandpaper here. And now that this is dried, just going to start sanding down and smoothing out all of these seams, everything pretty much except this one. This one I'm just going to leave the way it is, like I say, because I need it for definition. Okay, so I got this all sanded up and got it pretty smoothed out and even. The next one I'm going to do is I'm going to do some siliconing. One other thing that I didn't finish was, I don't know if you noticed or not, but earlier I did not glue these two pieces together. I did this on purpose. I wanted to see if the mask would fit first, and pleasantly enough it does, but not with these closed. So I just cut a little triangular wedge and super glued that in there, and had I closed this, I wouldn't have been able to put this on. I would have had to cut it right back open and put a wedge in it anyways. So yeah, if you were wondering earlier, why didn't he close this bottom piece? Yeah, it's because I had to try the mask on first and I had to wait for the glue to dry so there's no fumes and yada yada yada. So, okay, siliconing. Okay, siliconing. I use Alex Plus by a brand named DAP. This is all-purpose acrylic latex caulk plus silicone, 40-year guarantee, paint in 30 minutes, excellent flexibility, blah blah blah. I take that whole entire tube, put it in a caulk gun, and I squeeze it out into a Tupperware. Over here I have water, and I also have paper towels. I have a latex glove on, which I'm going to dip into this stuff here. And then I'm going to spread it out on every seam I want to cover. Mind you, this seam here, these seams here on the sides, and this seam here I do not want to cover. Just the ones down the middle and all these little areas here and here. So I'm going to go ahead and start applying a nice thin layer of this. I usually end up doing several layers of this all over the whole entire piece, generally, but not all at once. I let them dry in between. And I also want to cover up these little seams here as well, and that's a pretty good start for this spot here. Okay, and if this looks kind of globby and uneven, well, that's because it is. That's okay, because now I'm going to go through and smooth it out. All that stuff on my finger, try to wash that off as best as possible. Okay, and with my finger good and wet, I'm going to start smoothing this out. Since this is acrylic, you can just get your finger wet and spread it out, and it will make this much more even. And you want it as even as possible because you are going to have to sand it. And the more even it is before you sand, the easier it's going to be to sand, and yada yada yada. So the best thing is to get it as smooth and as even as possible before you have to go through and do that. Because if it's not smooth and even, it's going to be a whole lot harder to do later. Okay, so I'm just going to keep smoothing this out, evening it out till it looks nice, and I'm going to literally go through and do the whole mask in the same way. Okay, here it is after the first layer, and if I can pretty much see the line through it, I know it's not enough. So I'm going to have to go back through and repeat this process at least a couple times, and then I'm going to have to go back through and sand it smooth. Okay, here it is after the second coat. You can see that it is starting to cover up the seams a little bit more, although you can still see it. Probably going to do a third and possibly even a fourth coat because I do want this to look very smooth once I get done sanding it. Alright, coat number 3 has just gone on. I'm going to let this dry and then I'm going to go ahead and sand that and see how it turns out. Alright, now I'm going to move into sanding down, smoothing out, removing some of this excess silicone. And I generally work from this 75 grit to this, I think it's 150 grit to 300. I got a sanding block and some paper here, and finally last down to the 600 grit. And if I end up sanding too far through or it doesn't look even, then I'll just go back through and apply some more silicone. But first I got to get it some of the excess off and get it smoothed out just to see if I need to do a fourth layer of silicone or not. So I'm going to go ahead and start sanding it now. Okay, so I'm about a half hour into the sand process, and I've just been using the rough grit just to get out some of the streaks and graininess. You can see there's still some there I got to work out. And I haven't really done this at all, and you can see all the streaks and graininess are there. My only advice for sanding this is don't go too fast with your sand. Give it a nice even pace, but don't go too fast and don't press too hard because you will tear the silicone and rip it off. You want it to look nice, so just be patient. That's my main advice. If you're going to do the siliconing, just be patient. Okay, at this point I've been sanding for about an hour or so total, and I'm down to 320 grit. I don't know how well this is going to show up on camera. I'm going to try to show you anyways. Little areas, get this focused in, like right in there you can see that texture and that grain. And that's basically what I'm working out now with the 320 grit sandpaper. And once I get all those little problem areas worked out, which I know this once again seems like a ridiculous amount of work for, covering some seams, but I like the end result. I feel like it's worth it. But I'm going to do that. I'm going to run over it with a 320 grit sanding block, and then I'm going to do a fine polish with the 600. And then I'm going to be done and ready to start Mod Podging. Okay, so I've got my Mod Podge, and I actually took some other in an empty container I had and poured some in it with some water and some airbrush thinner, and I threw a nut in it to act as a rattle, kind of like in a spray paint can, so I can mix it up. I'm going to attempt to put that in my airbrush and spray it on because I quite frankly don't have the money for plastic if I'm that broke. So before I get to that though, I'm going to use this stuff and a regular old craft brush to fill in a couple of little dings like this right here. I got a drop of, I believe, contact cement on it, and whenever I went to sand it off, it took the foam with it and it left a little crater there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of Mod Podge, and I'm going to try to fill it in with this. Okay, so the hole's filled in there, and I'm just going to go ahead and spread out all this other stuff around it so I don't have a big gloopy mess. And I'm going to let this dry for about an hour, and I'm going to come back, and if this sunk in a lot or isn't very flush, I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit more in it. But yeah, I'm going to go around, and anywhere on the mask where there's a little, like you can see there's a couple little nicks. I'm just going to go around with this and try to fill it in, even it out before I do the final seal. Alright, so I was able to get the thinned out Mod Podge to go through the airbrush. It was pretty slow and laborious, and I did have to clean it a lot. However, I started spraying it an hour ago, and I'm already done, and it's already dried. So I can move on to painting, and I just have some regular old red and the airbrush, and I'm just going to start spraying this down. Already starting to come along here. I am going to have to apply several coats because as you can see the difference here in contrast. It just goes on so thin that I generally have to apply several coats. However, it is less dry time than spray paint for sure. In an hour or so, it's ready to go. Alright, now that all the painting is done, well, the initial painting, as I wait on this to dry, I'm going to start making the black eyepieces that are going to go in here. I'm going to do that by simply sticking a piece of paper behind here and tracing out the general shape. Doesn't have to be exact, general shape of each eye. And, excuse me, I'm going to cut a piece of foam that's larger than that, put some eye holes in it with some screen, some white screen. So first I'm going to make my pattern. Alright, I traced out the shape of the eye, and I basically just gave it some space around it so I have something to glue it to. And next I'm going to trace one Flip it over and trace out another out of some 2mm black EVA foam that I had laying around. Right, I have my 2 eyepieces cut out. Next, I need to cut some holes for some eyes here, so I'm going to look around at some comic book images online from Red Hood and decide how I want the shape of the eye. Alright, I figured out the shape that I wanted for the eye, so I went ahead and cut it out, and I used an X-Acto knife for that. And now that I have one done, I'm going to take this, flip it upside down onto the other one, line it up as exactly as I can, trace this out, and cut it out of the other side. Alright, and here I have both pieces cut and ready. Next, I'm going to put some heat on them with the heat gun and give them a little bit of shape. Alright, and here you can see the difference. This one I've heated and put some shape to. And this one is, of course, just still flat. I'm going to go ahead and heat this one up next and try to stretch pretty much the same shape as that into this. Alright, now that I got both of these done, have relatively the same shape in both, I'm going to go get some white sheer fabric to cover the eyes here. It's going to get glued onto the back here. Alright, I glued the screen in, and to get it to stay in place, because I did use super glue on it, I put some glue on the back side of the mask. I gently laid the cloth over it. Then I cut some little strips of EVA foam and used that to press it together to get it to stick and have a nice, decent shape to it as well. Alright, so now that those are done, I'm going to go back and paint the rest of the mask. I'm going to do some overspray and a couple other things, and I'm going to give it a clear coat lacquer. I thought about doing some overspray on this, but I kind of decided against it. I did do some in black, but I didn't like it. The black lines, I literally just took a brand new Sharpie out of the package and just traced around it. And that's pretty much it. Yeah, pretty happy with this so far. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next phase, which is going to be gluing in the eyepieces that I made with the screens. Alright, I just used some super glue to put in both of these lenses here. And I left the EVA foam that dry matte black so it'll really suck in the light and have a contrast to some of the gloss effect of the actual red part of the hood itself. And yeah, I got the screen in there now. I just gotta wait for the glue to dry so I can finally try this on and see how it looks. Alright, here it is all finished with the lenses put in it. And it has a nice, pretty dark red. And when the light hits it though, it gets a nice bright shine to it. Pretty stoked on it. I like how this is a nice matte. Okay, the only thing left is for me to try it on. Alright, so here it is. Feels pretty comfortable. I didn't even have to put any padding or anything to get it to fit. It just fits really, really well. It's not too hot. There's enough space that it allows some air to go through. So yeah, I'm pretty stoked on this. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. And as always, thanks for watching.